After a long spell, we finally got a sunny holiday morning. While hanging out the bedding, I heard heavy footsteps approaching. Entering the living room were John and Emily. Both carrying a lot of stuff and panting, but upon seeing me, they grinned and dropped a bombshell. "We're moving in with you from today. If you don't like it, divorce and leave." Stunned, I watched as they started spreading out their belongings in the living room. Then, Sarah entered, looking apologetic, and I quietly spoke up. "Is this really okay? I mean, she's..." "What?" John, hearing my words, turned pale and dashed out of the house. A few minutes later, he called, shouting loud enough for Emily to hear. "Are you kidding me? Why didn't you say anything?" "Oh, I mentioned it before, didn't I?" After a pause, John said, "I'm coming back home," and hung up abruptly. Emily looked like she was about to faint at John's yelling. "I can't wait for John to come back." At my words, Emily flinched. "Brace yourself, the real fight starts now. I am Linda Thompson, a 45-year-old office worker. Last year, I got transferred to a department with lots of overtime, leading to hectic days. I married John when I was 40. We met at a company year-end party where John was a guest. I was his hostess, and we hit it off since we were from the same hometown. John, 5 years my senior, was a go-getter, and I was grateful, having given up on marriage as I neared 40. We married after a year of dating. The wedding was simple, as John said it was unnecessary, a decision I now regret. "Hey! You skipped laundry again!" John is a traditional, dominant husband. Despite living alone before marriage and knowing how to do household chores, he believes men shouldn't do them and left everything to me. "I was going to do it tonight, I got home late from overtime." Exhausted and scolded as soon as I got home, I felt even more drained. John, unhappy with my response, started to get angry. "Don't talk back. Who do you think provides for you?" Frankly, I earn more than John. We both knew this when we married and chose to work together. But a year into the marriage, he seemed to forget. Initially, I argued back, but as John's temper flared, I started apologizing quickly to keep the peace. "I'm sorry. It was my fault." "Do you really think so?" "Yes, thank you. Your hard work is what keeps us going." This would satisfy John. And he'd cheerfully go to take a shower. At first, I found his dominant nature manly, but after 3 years, I was fed up. I didn't choose divorce because his parents were wonderful. I would have lunch monthly with his mother, and his father gave me birthday gifts. When visiting them, John was kind and the time was pleasant. My own parents passed away early, so his parents were as dear to me as my own. That's why I hesitated about divorce, but I had my limits. That was Emily, John's sister, living nearby. She's divorced. Apparently due to her infidelity. Since learning this, I've been uncomfortable around her. Emily disliked me too and would badmouth me, even in front of John. John adored Emily and never reprimanded her, often joining in the criticism. Emily, who I've been dealing with, has a daughter, Sarah, with her ex-husband. Sarah looks just like Emily but is the complete opposite in character, a really sweet girl. She visits Emily about twice a month. And every time, Emily brings her over to our place. "Hey Linda, could you feed Sarah some good food? I gotta head out soon." "What? So sudden?" "Just take care of it, okay?" Emily would leave without waiting for my response. And Sarah would always apologize. I couldn't leave kind Sarah alone, so I always ended up feeding her and taking her out. "Thanks for everything, Linda." "Did you have fun?" "Yeah, a lot. Can I come again?" "Of course." I couldn't say no to Sarah, who would ask so timidly. Having no kids myself, I'd grown fond of her. But I wondered if it was right for Emily to be absent from Sarah's visits. I decided to ask John. "Hey, isn't it a bit much that Emily's never here when Sarah visits? Couldn't she spend a bit more time with her?" I only had Sarah's best interests at heart, but John didn't take it that way. His face turned red, and he yelled at me like a madman. "Emily's been hurt by the divorce. She's delicate, not like you. And you blame her?" "No, I just wondered where she goes, leaving Sarah here." "It's none of your business. Just shut up and do as you're told." John wouldn't listen to reason, so I dropped the subject. After multiple apologies, he calmed down and started getting ready to go out. "I'm stepping out. Where to? That's my business. Just say have a nice day. John stormed out, slamming the door, leaving me alone in the silent room, crying. That's when I seriously started thinking about divorce. I wanted to divorce, but hesitated because of my in-laws. Then, my mother-in-law invited me for lunch. John warned me before I left. Where are you going on your day off? I'm going to have lunch with your mother. Don't bring up Emily with Mom. Why not? I didn't understand the meaning, so I asked him again. Then, John seemed irritated and started yelling. Just don't. Are you that dense? Just go, but don't mention Emily. He pushed me out of the house without waiting for my reply. Confused, I met with my mother-in-law for lunch. Emily's staying with you, right? What? You knew? I'm sorry, dear. My mother-in-law apologized, saying Sarah had told her I was being burdened. Emily's obsessed with a nightclub or casino, and in serious debt. Debt? That's right. It looks like she has quite a bit of debt. I was shocked. Emily always dressed in designer clothes when she visited. I told this to my mother-in-law, who looked even more troubled. We've cut ties with her. You should cut ties too. John's just spoiling her. She revealed that even when Emily's infidelity came out, John blamed it on her ex and even paid off some of her debts. John was overly protective of his sister. I was told that he had taken over debts in the past, which completely opened my eyes. I'm thinking of divorcing John. Sorry to be a bother. That's only right. I'll help you. She held my hand, and I planned my divorce. Thinking of what my mother would be like if she were still alive, I decided to start planning for divorce. Doing everything discreetly to avoid John's notice. I tried to talk to him about Emily's debts, but he wouldn't listen. I lost all affection for him, who yelled at me. With my in-laws' help, I gathered evidence and learned shocking truths. All that was left was to set a date for the final move, and that day came unexpectedly. On a long-awaited sunny holiday morning. While I was airing out the bedding, I heard hurried footsteps. Entering the living room were John and Emily, both loaded with bags, panting heavily. Spotting me, they grinned mischievously and dropped a bombshell. We're moving in with you from today. If you don't like it, divorce and leave. Stunned, I watched as they began spreading their stuff in the living room. Then, Sarah, looking sheepish, followed them in, prompting me to speak up quietly. Is this really okay? I mean, her. What? John, hearing this, turned pale and bolted out of the house. Minutes later, he called, yelling so loudly that even Emily could hear. This is nonsense. Why didn't you say anything? Oh, I mentioned it before, didn't I? After a brief silence, John snapped, I'm coming back, and abruptly hung up. Emily looked like she was about to faint at John's yelling. I can't wait for John to come back. At my words, Emily visibly shuddered. Brace yourself, the real fight is about to begin. Upon his return, John confronted Emily. Emily! What's this about debts? I didn't know anything about this. It's just a little debt. As Emily answered, avoiding eye contact, I couldn't help but chuckle. She glared at me. And I decided to enlighten her. Wow, Emily, having a $300,000 debt and calling it little. I couldn't say that, that's too much for me. Rich people are different. $300,000? Emily looked at me, her face a mix of shock and dismay. But I didn't relent and continued. I continued to talk one-sidedly. I heard your friend recently got married. Looks like he dumped you. I'm not dumped. Once we get this house, he'll come back. And with the money from selling this place. Oh. Realizing she'd spilled her plan, Emily looked at John, regret written all over her face. John, utterly confused, looked back and forth between Emily and me. I told him the harsh truth. Emily planned to kick me out, then you, to sell this house and pay off her debts, and then shower her boyfriend with gifts. What? John stood there, stunned. Unable to believe his beloved sister was using him. All lies, then? You said you wanted to live with Sarah, that I'd work and support you both. Hearing John, my head ached. He couldn't support his wife but planned to support his sister and niece? Emily defiantly responded. You're just an ATM to me, John. Once we sell the house, I can go back to him.
Won't you help me out?
ATM? What the?
Oh, shut up.
Emily's brazen attitude and John's furious yelling left me out of their equation. Their quarrel was ugly and absurd. It was Sarah who finally spoke up.
John, Mom, enough. I don't want to live with you, and I came here today to say goodbye. Sarah! What do you mean?
Both Emily and John were stunned, stopping their fight to look at Sarah. She sighed heavily, looked straight at Emily, and began to speak slowly.
Mom, you're not interested in what I have to say, right? I think I mentioned it before, but I'm going to study abroad after high school. So, today was about saying goodbye. I never heard that!
Emily exclaimed loudly. Sarah looked at her mother coldly, her gaze icy.
That's because you never listen. You're always chasing after men. I don't need a mom like that. For me, Linda's been like a real mother. What? What do you mean by that?
Emily glared at us as if we were enemies. I was just as surprised. Sarah came over and hugged me tightly.
Thanks for always being there, for the delicious meals, for listening, and for taking me out. You felt like my real mom.
Sarah's words made me tear up. Everything I had done for her felt rewarding, filled with a sense of fulfillment and happiness. I never had children, so I often wondered if I was doing right by Sarah. I was very impressed.
Sarah, I've been so happy to have you. Do your best over there, okay?
As I wiped my tears, Sarah smiled at me.
Yeah, I want to call and message you.
Is that okay?
Of course.
We shared a smile. While Emily looked on, seething with envy. Then, as if struck by an idea, she started to smirk.
Sarah,
I'll come with you.
What?
Why?
It'll be hard for you alone over there.
Let's live together.
They're gonna pay for living expenses, right?
Her audacity left me speechless. Sarah looked just as appalled. Unaware of our reaction, Emily fantasized about her life abroad.
While you're at school, I'll go to the beach or shopping, and while she's at work, I'll nap. At night, maybe I'll go out.
Emily's plan was all about play, no work. Sarah looked at her with contempt, then suddenly burst into laughter.
What's so funny? It's hilarious. Like I'd want to live with you. And I'm staying in a student accommodation, so you can't come.
Emily's face turned red with anger. But Sarah didn't stop. Just as Emily was about to snap and lunge at Sarah, a stern voice intervened.
Enough of this. Dad!
My father-in-law appeared in the living room. With my mother-in-law beside him, looking furious.
Linda told us everything. When will you stop causing trouble for others? Mom! It's a misunderstanding. Sarah decided this on her own.
Emily's explanation was cut short as our mother-in-law raised her hand. A slap echoed in the room, followed by silence. Emily was the first to speak.
That's terrible. Hitting me.
My mother-in-law sharply retorted.
You deserved it. You've been a nuisance to Linda. I was wrong to leave you be. You're going to live with relatives from now on.
Emily, pale-faced, turned to John for help, but he looked away, having realized her betrayal. Left alone and in despair, Emily was led out by my father-in-law.
Look, I'm sorry. I should have listened more to what Linda had to say. From now on, I'll make sure to listen. To think there'll be a next time, what an optimistic mind you have.
John's flippant remark was sharply cut down by my mother-in-law. John, taken aback, looked on as she continued with an emotionless expression.
I told you before, didn't I? To cut ties with Emily, especially if you were going to get married. But you didn't listen. The only choice you have now is divorce.
John's face turned pale as he looked over at me. I smiled at him, a bit of relief before dropping him into hell. Then, when he felt a little relieved, I opened my mouth to send him to hell. Let's get divorced.
I'll be asking for alimony too. For your verbal abuse. And I know your infidelity. Infidelity? What are you talking about?
John stumbled over his words, feigning ignorance. It was pathetic to think I ever found him reliable. I pulled out several photos from my bag. You know this woman, don't you?
Did you spy on me? It's your own fault for doing things worth spying on, isn't it? Ugh.
John, with no room for argument, stayed silent, looking defeated. I laid out the papers in front of him and had him sign. After everything was finalized, I spoke to John with a smile.
Thanks for everything. But, to be honest, I earned more, did all the housework, and managed everything else. It was me who took care of you. So, take care. And don't forget the payments.
John had nothing to say in response. I said my goodbyes to my mother-in-law and left our home. My belongings would be picked up later, and I planned to spend the night at a nearby hotel after dropping Sarah off at her place. The room was beautiful, the bed soft. A space where there's no one to complain about. That night, I regained my freedom for the first time in 5 years. The next day, I officially asked a lawyer to proceed with our divorce. My mother-in-law apologized and assured me that John would transfer the full alimony within a week, which he did. John had given most of his savings to Emily, so my in-laws covered the alimony. And said they'd make sure John paid them back in full. John lost his job and, along with Emily, was sent to live with a different relative. They run a ranch, and he's worked hard every day without a break. Escape is impossible for him since he's never driven on mountain roads before. While I feel it's tough for him, I don't pity him. John's mistress turned out to be a nightclub worker who saw him as just another customer. She didn't even know he was married and apologized to me. Even returning the designer bags he'd given her, which I sold and used the money for lunches with Sarah. Emily ended up with relatives near the sea, working hard from dawn every day. Her once well-maintained appearance has deteriorated. Apparently, she's working off the child support debt she owed Sarah's father, which the relatives had to cover. I can only hope that she will change her mind even just a little. Sarah, on the other hand, successfully went abroad and is enjoying her dorm life. She's made a close friend and plans to bring her to the States during a long break. She asked if they could stay at my place and go sightseeing, which I happily agreed to. As for me, life is busy as usual. But so much better without someone complaining all the time. That alone makes me feel quite different. Although my life is busy, I am spending a very fulfilling life. I've even started seeing Sarah's father, a kind man with similar interests. He was a very nice guy and we exchanged contact information. As we kept talking about Sarah, we started going out together. We shared hobbies and tastes, so just being with him makes me feel at ease. We've grown close, and it's a comfort I never had with John. Sarah's thrilled about us and jokingly asked when we're getting married. I haven't thought that far, but who knows what the future holds. For me, Sarah is like a real daughter. Sarah thinks so too. I hope we can become a true family someday. With that hope, I head to work each day, looking forward to what the future might bring.